I never planned for the world to find out about Emily and meant it like this, not in front of millions of viewers holding their breath, waiting to see whose name would pop up on my phone. But it happened. I lost that stupid game on the live variety show, and the punishment was simple: call the top contact in your favorites list. I hesitated for less than a second. The audience didn't miss it. The director gave a dramatic drum roll, the crew leaned in, and my thumb hovered over the screen. My chest tightened as I hit call. Then came the voice. Male. Familiar. James Carter. The guy chuckled, as if we were old buddies catching up. Emily's making hangover soup. If you've got something to say, just tell me. My smile froze before the laughter in the studio even died. The air turned brittle. My agent, Laura, went white and dropped her headset. The director scrambled to cut the feed. Too late. The damage was already done. And the voice on the other end? Ethan Miller. Her so-called childhood friend. The one I was never supposed to worry about. That night, Emily stayed quiet publicly. No statement. No apology. No clarification. Just a single photo on her Weibo. It was blurry, artsy, the kind fans dissect pixel by pixel. In it, a boy buried his head in her chest, the curve of his back curled toward her like a lost child. She captioned it, "My fiancé is an amateur. Please be kind." I was the boy. I recognized the back of my own neck. The angle of my shoulder. But she never named me. Just a vague declaration that raised more questions than it answered. Who was this man? Who was she really claiming? The media went wild. Paparazzi camped outside my apartment and hers, flashing bulbs in the windows at night. Theories exploded across every platform. I begged a couple of journalist friends to go easy. Laura put her phone on silent and fielded all the PR missiles herself. By the next morning, I'd made my decision. I packed my bags, caught the earliest flight to London, and scrubbed her from my life plan. But the truth? Emily and I had been together for 3 years quietly, fiercely, completely. We'd met on set 5 years ago, filming a series neither of us believed in until it became a sensation. Fans loved us. They called us soulmates, created ship names, flooded every comment section with hearts and roses. Management told us to let them dream, so we stayed in the shadows, kissing behind closed doors, brushing fingertips under restaurant tables, whispering I love yous through cracked phone screens at midnight. It was romantic, in a tragic sort of way. And I was fine with that. Until that call. Until Ethan answered. The first time I met him was at a holiday dinner Emily insisted on hosting. She called it a casual get-together, said it would be good for me to meet the people who mattered most to her. I was already nervous, unsure if I was boyfriend or accessory that night. When Ethan walked in, my stomach dropped. He was younger, maybe by 2 years, and annoyingly perfect. Tall, lithe, dressed in a sleek black jacket with a gray scarf knotted loosely around his neck. His face still held that soft, untouched innocence, eyes too wide for a man, smile too confident for a boy. He walked right up to me and offered his hand. "So you're James," he said warmly. "Damn. No wonder she likes you." I laughed awkwardly, pulling my hand back. His palm was warm, maybe too warm. "You're Ethan?" I asked. "The famous childhood friend?" He grinned, as if proud of the title. "Guilty. I used to call her sis, but now she won't let me." He turned to Emily with mock disappointment. "You sold me out for this guy?" Emily smacked his arm playfully. "Stop it. Be nice." They laughed like kids in a sandbox, tumbling into each other's space like I wasn't even there. At dinner, I tried to keep up, but they had too many stories, too many inside jokes, too many shared looks I didn't know how to read. When we stepped outside afterward, Ethan and I ended up alone, waiting by the curb while Emily fetched the car. The cold bit through my coat, but he didn't shiver. He turned to me, eyes sharp. You know, she's had a lot of people try to take her away from me. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not taking her anywhere. You sure about that? He asked, his voice soft but edged like a blade. You've only been with her what, 1 year? 2. I've known her since she wore braces and cried over dead birds. I didn't respond. The car pulled up, Emily waved us in, and the moment passed. But I never forgot it. Over the next year, Ethan kept showing up. He'd call Emily late at night, claiming he was drunk and needed her to pick him up. He'd ask her to accompany him on long weekend trips under the pretense of emotional support. She never said no. Even when she was sick, even when she had an early flight or a shoot the next day, she went. I offered to go in her place once. She smiled and kissed my forehead. You're sweet, but it's fine. I'll handle it. I sat alone that night, watching the snow fall through the window, wondering when I'd become the person she left behind. After the call scandal, I expected her to take my side. Or at least explain. But when she finally rang me, it wasn't regret I heard in her voice, it was irritation. Was that necessary, James? She snapped. I was at dinner with Laura, trying to focus on steak and not headlines. What do you mean, necessary? I asked. It was a game. I didn't plan the rules. You lost on purpose. Seriously? I almost laughed. You think I wanted that broadcasted? You should have just picked someone else. Anyone. Why would you still have me pinned if you didn't want people to know? Her words hit something raw in me. I had always saved her under her full name. No emojis. No cutesy nicknames. Just Emily Harper, the only way to ensure no one suspected. Her idea. She used to get annoyed if I liked another girl's photo on Instagram. She once asked to check my follow list to make sure she was the top priority. I went along with it, thinking it was love. Now, it felt like a trap. You're the one who didn't want to go public, I reminded her. You're the one who said it would ruin your mystique. That was before, she murmured. Before what? Before you decided Ethan was more convenient to show off. Silence. Then a sigh. He cried, James. He's being attacked by my fans. You don't know how hard this has been for him. I closed my eyes. The same boy who used to grab her wrist like she belonged to him. The same boy who once told me I wasn't man enough to keep her. And now he was crying. Emily, I said softly, strong people don't manipulate others to feel important. Strong people don't rely on pity. You've changed, she whispered. Maybe, I replied. Maybe I finally grew up. That week, her agent Nathan showed up unannounced at Laura's office. He looked like Hellglasses Askew, no coat, hands trembling. We need to talk, he said. Privately. I let him in. Laura folded her arms, unimpressed. Isn't this the same guy who told us to keep it quiet for Emily's career? Yes, he admitted. But now I'm asking you to end it. Officially. For her sake. Her sake, Laura echoed, her voice dripping venom. And what about James? What about the last 3 years he gave up for her? It's not my decision, Nathan said, looking at me. It's hers. I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. Just nodded. Fine. Draft the statement. We'll follow your lead. Nathan looked relieved, but Laura exploded the moment he left. Why the hell did you agree to that? I shrugged. Because she already left. I'm just catching up. When Emily called again, her voice was syrupy, trying to play soft. This is just temporary. We'll fix it after the storm. I'll make it right. I listened. I let her talk. But something in me had already shut down. I was done being her secret. I was done being her shame. That night, I booked my flight. Before I boarded, I deleted her number, one swipe at a time. Pinned posts gone. Messages wiped. And when the plane took off, I finally looked out the window and smiled, not because I was free, but because I'd survived loving her in silence for far too long. The first few weeks abroad passed in a strange kind of silence, not the peaceful kind that brings clarity, but the hollow sort that echoes even louder when you try to fill it. London was cold, indifferent, and beautifully detached, everything I needed it to be. I took early morning walks through Hyde Park just to hear the crunch of leaves under my boots. I kept my hood up, my head down, and my voice tucked tightly in my chest. It was the first time in years I was no one again. No red carpets. No scripted answers. No Emily. And for a while, that anonymity felt like oxygen. But like all things that pretend to heal, the cracks eventually surfaced. I found myself checking my phone for messages that would never come, opening old albums just to see her face pixelated beside mine. I'd stare too long at the empty top of my contact list, that blank space where her name used to be like a silent grave. Then I'd snap out of it, slam the phone down, and go run until my lungs burned. It was a routine I hated but couldn't stop. Then came the tabloids. I should have known silence wouldn't be enough. A classmate showed me the article one morning during break, her voice laced with awe. "Isn't this your ex?" Swoosh really moved on fast. On the screen was a photo of Ethan and Emily entering a condo together. Her hand on his shoulder. His keys in the door. The headline read, "America's Sweetheart and Her College Flame Love Rekindled." I laughed. Not out loud. Just internally, bitterly. So that was how she wanted to play it. Public forgiveness via nostalgia. Childhood sweethearts, clean, poetic, unthreatening. No one gets angry at a woman who ends up with her first love. No one questions the timeline when it's spun like a fairy tale. The audience eats it up. They always do. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at the photo, the sliver of my old life she held onto like a souvenir, and I felt something rot a little deeper inside me. A week later, Emily showed up. In the snow. No umbrella. No coat thick enough for the wind. Just her and a thin wool scarf wrapped clumsily around her neck. She stood outside the dorm entrance like a ghost misplaced in time. My roommate had no idea who she was. "There's this woman," he said, confused. "Been out there for an hour. Keeps asking for you." My heart clenched and loosened at the same time. I almost didn't go down. Almost. But curiosity is a cruel temptation. When I opened the front door, she looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and glassy. "James." She said my name like it still belonged to her. I didn't speak. I leaned on the railing, arms crossed, watching her shiver. Snowflakes clung to her lashes like tiny white lies. "Why did you block me?" Her voice cracked. "Why wouldn't you let me explain?" "You already did," I replied flatly. "On national television. In photos. With Ethan." She stepped closer. "It wasn't real. Not like that." "You know it wasn't." I tilted my head, curious. "Then what was it?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Only excuses, silent and pitiful. "I know you were hurt. I should have handled it differently," she whispered. "But I was scared." "Of what? Losing me? Or losing fans?" That hit her harder than I expected. She looked away, brushing snow from her hair with trembling fingers. "I thought I could control it. The narrative. The timing. Him." Her voice softened. "But you're the only person I couldn't control, James. You always saw through me." I laughed, not cruelly, just exhausted. "And that scared you?" "No," she said. "That's what I loved about you." For a second, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the way she'd smiled with Ethan on that show. The way her body tilted instinctively toward him, how her fingers lingered on his wrist like they belonged there. "We can't go back," I said. Even if I wanted to, we're already too far from who we were. You don't mean that. She stepped closer again, reached for my arm, but I pulled back. Don't, I said quietly. Please don't touch me just to prove you can. Her expression shattered. I turned and walked back inside without another word. That should have been the end of it. But endings are rarely neat in real life. She began sending flowers to the dorm. Messages through mutual friends. Email after email. I blocked her again and again, and still she found ways to reach me. Her latest attempt. She enrolled in a short-term program at the same university. She was relentless, fueled by guilt, desperation, or maybe just habit. I wasn't sure anymore. Then Ethan showed up. In the hallway outside my class. Face flushed, fists clenched, breathing hard like he'd just run from some emotional apocalypse. You think you're clever, he hissed. Coming back into her life like this. She's finally moving on. I stared at him. Then what are you so afraid of? You're manipulating her, he snapped. Playing the victim. Making her chase you. Funny, I said, stepping closer, that's exactly what you did for 3 years. He shoved me. Hard. My back hit the lockers with a dull clang. For a second, I saw red. Then I punched him once, clean across the jaw. He stumbled back, slipped, and went down. No blood. Just stunned silence. People gathered. Emily came running minutes later, eyes wild, cheeks flushed from cold and panic. She dropped to her knees beside him. Ethan. Ethan. He groaned, playing it up. She turned to me, rage painted across her features. What did you do? What he's been asking for, I said calmly. For years. Later that night, she called. Her voice was soft, broken. He's in the hospital. Concussion. He'll survive. James, you need to apologize. I let that hang for a while. To him? Yes. For me. Please. Just say sorry. Let him walk away from this without more pain. Why? I asked. So he can spin this into another sob story. Another chapter in the Emily Harper pity novel. She didn't answer. He's not your responsibility, I added. He never was. You've changed, she whispered. No, I said. I've just finally stopped pretending you didn't. The next morning, the internet erupted. A fan-made PowerPoint of all our couple items, hats, coats, phones, even matching sneakers, had gone viral. Someone had circled everything, annotated with captions like, coincidence? I think not. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the homewrecker anymore. I was the discarded. The ghosted. The man who loved her quietly while she danced in the spotlight with someone else. Public sympathy poured in. DMs from strangers told me to stay strong, you deserve better, we see you. Even people who once mocked me were now writing think pieces on how I'd been used. Ethan's image crumbled faster than I thought possible. Former classmates came forward. Stories of bullying, privilege, fake friendships all flooding in at once. Videos of him shoving people, locking someone in a bathroom. The image of the golden boy was gone, replaced with something sour. He lost his spot in graduate school. His parents' company's reputation took a hit. Emily's team, panicked, tried to do damage control, denouncing him, calling him a private matter. Emily herself stayed silent. She knew better. But that silence only amplified the noise. Every time I logged in, there was something new: Ethan throwing tantrums at coffee shops, storming off from interviews, snapping at fans who dared to question his past. And beneath it all, buried in the comments, were the words I'd waited so long to read: Emily Harper doesn't deserve James Carter. He was too good for her. She'll regret losing him. But by then, it didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for justice. I wasn't hoping for her to fall. I had already started climbing out of the wreckage, one quiet step at a time. And with each breath of cold London air, I felt something solid grow inside me. Not anger. Not even resentment. Just distance. A clean, sharp line drawn between who I was and who I was becoming. A man no longer defined by someone else's spotlight. The first time I realized I no longer loved her was strangely quiet, like someone had turned off the background music that had been playing in my life for 3 years without me noticing. There was no dramatic scene, no angry monologue, no crash of plates or tearful goodbyes, just a message from Emily, simple and sterile: "Thank you, James." That was it. No apology. No regret. Just gratitude, as if I were a doorman holding the elevator for her and Ethan to ride off into their pastel-colored fairy tale. I stared at that message, the blue tick mocking me, then screenshotted it instinctively before deleting it, like you would swat away a mosquito. More annoyance than injury at this point. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just done. But the world wasn't. The industry, the fans, the endless whirlpool of gossip didn't stop spinning just because I'd stepped off the ride. Emily's team kept trying to repair her image, pinning all the chaos on Ethan, who now seemed to be caught in a storm of his own making. Scandals surfaced one after another: past bullying, academic dishonesty, even whispered rumors of him manipulating other students. And then came the leak. Someone, God knows who, dug up an old group chat from high school where Ethan had bragged about how easy it was to get under Emily's skin, how she always came running when he cried, how she was the perfect combination of pretty and predictable. The internet exploded. Hashtags like Golden Boyfall and Manipulative Makoto trended for days. His account turned private, then disappeared entirely. Meanwhile, Emily posted a glossy selfie from some luxury shoot, her smile wide, her caption tone deaf: "Thank you for always supporting me. I'm learning and growing every day." The comments section didn't hold back. Learning how to step on people like James. Where was the growth when you let your fans harass him? You're only sorry because you got caught. I didn't comment. I didn't like, share, or subtweet. But I watched. Not because I cared to see her punished, I wasn't vindictive, but because part of me was still curious to see how she would spin it. If she would finally own something. But she didn't. She vanished for a few weeks, then re-emerged with a new project announcement and a carefully curated video where she cried in soft lighting, speaking vaguely about losing herself and making mistakes in love. Not once did she say my name. Not once did she say his. Her team thought vagueness was a strategy. But when you don't name your pain, people assume you don't have any. Meanwhile, I went back to work. My coursework intensified, and I buried myself in scripts and technique. I wanted to strip everything down: my voice, my posture, my presence, until I found the core of who I was as a performer. The acting professor, a sharp-tongued Brit named Dr. Ashcroft, watched me in rehearsals like a hawk. "You're good, Carter," he said one evening after class. "But you're still bleeding." I blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, tapping my chest with his pen, "your grief is showing. You can't pretend to be someone else when you haven't let go of who you were." That stuck with me for days. I walked through the streets of London replaying that line, wondering what it meant to truly let go. Then came the message from my assistant, Clara. She'd stayed behind in LA to help coordinate my schedules remotely. "They want you on Star Collision," she wrote. "One guest appearance. High-profile variety reunion. Emily might be there too." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. My first instinct was no. Absolutely not. But then another thought crept in: what if I wasn't the same James anymore? What if I didn't need to avoid her because there was nothing left to protect? I agreed. The studio was massive, slick floors, neon lighting, that artificially excited air you can only find on sets that live off illusion. Laura met me outside my dressing room, her expression unreadable. "She's here," she said. "With him?" "No. Apparently, she dropped him after the hospital incident." PR nightmare. He's radioactive now. I nodded. Figures. You okay? She asked. I looked at her, really looked. I think I'm better than I've ever been. The show began. Laughter, applause, polite banter. Then the host leaned in, all charm and fangs, and said, "So, James, what was it like dating someone in the public eye? Any regrets?" My smile didn't waver. I think love taught me more than any class ever could. Emily, seated 3 stools away, glanced at me quickly. Her eyes softened, but I didn't meet them. I stared into the camera, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make it uncomfortable. The segment ended. During the break, she approached me backstage. "You look good," she said hesitantly. "London suits you." "It suits the version of me you didn't want to see," I said evenly. She winced. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "You once asked me if going public was worth it. You thought silence protected us. But all it did was protect your image." Her mouth opened, then shut. "I was scared," she said again. "You keep saying that," I replied. "But fear isn't an excuse forever." She blinked fast. "Can we talk? After this?" I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about. I just wanted to see if I could stand next to you without falling apart. And I can." She stared at me, eyes shimmering. But I walked away. That night, the final segment aired, and the internet exploded again. Clips of our interactions, comparisons to the old us, threads analyzing every micro-expression. "You can see when he stops loving her," someone posted with a timestamp. "That's the moment his smile turned real." I watched none of it. I went back to campus, opened my laptop, and submitted my final paper for acting theory. Then I opened a blank document and began typing again for me, not for anyone else. For the first time in years, I wasn't writing dialogue for others to read. I was reclaiming my voice. Emily messaged one last time a week later. Just 4 words, "Do you miss me?" I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I missed the idea of her, the version of her that loved me fully and fearlessly. But that version never really existed. It was a role she played, and I, the fool who believed the performance. In the end, we were just 2 actors who lost ourselves in a script neither of us wrote, clinging to lines that sounded like love but never quite made it real. There's something oddly intoxicating about watching a perfectly constructed illusion come undone, not because you enjoy the destruction, but because you realize how fragile it was to begin with. Ethan's downfall wasn't a dramatic explosion, it was a slow, grinding erosion that chipped away at every pedestal he'd ever climbed. It started with whispers, those quiet internet voices that used to be ignored but now were amplified through screenshots, live streams, and screen recordings. His former classmates, once background characters in his curated life, stepped forward like witnesses at a trial. One girl spoke through tears in a viral video about how he'd locked her in the janitor's closet because she called Emily beautiful in front of him. Another guy detailed how Ethan dragged him out of a swimming pool and held him underwater for laughing at Emily's scene partner. There were bruises. A hospital visit. A file that had been ignored by faculty at the time because Ethan's family had donated generously to the school's new arts building. The moment that file hit the public, the internet did what it always does, it devoured him. Petitions circulated to revoke his grad school admission. Parents wrote open letters to the university. Brands that once flirted with the idea of leveraging his boy-next-door charm now scrubbed him clean from their archives. And I, thousands of miles away, watched it all from a little rented room with gray walls and a leaky radiator. Clara messaged me daily with updates. She had a sick fascination with the scandal, but also a sincere desire to protect my name. "You're trending again," she'd write. "But this time, everyone's on your side." I didn't reply most days. What was there to say? Justice tastes different when it arrives too late. It doesn't heal, it simply stops the bleeding. The true irony was that in her attempt to protect Ethan, Emily had tied her own reputation to his sinking ship. The longer she remained silent, the more people questioned her complicity. Fans turned. CP accounts disbanded. The top pinned post on one fan page simply read, "We were wrong." Then came the statement from her team, a carefully worded, emotionally vacant piece of PR debris that essentially threw Ethan under the bus. Emily Harper was unaware of Ethan Miller's behavior. She condemns all forms of bullying and stands with the victims. It read like a press release for a brand, not a person. And the backlash hit harder than they expected. You didn't know. You dated him on camera. You stood by him while your fans harassed James. You watched him mock others and said nothing. The betrayal people felt wasn't just toward Might, was toward their own belief in her. She had sold herself as the girl who rose above it all. And now she was just another actress protecting her spotlight. But she didn't stop. Not really. She tried again. Contacted Clara. Requested a private sit-down. Promised it wasn't for headlines, that she just wanted to explain, heart to heart. I didn't agree. I didn't respond. And that, I think, hurt her more than any public statement ever could. When someone like Emily loses control of a narrative, they don't unravel all at once, they unravel privately, in fragments, behind closed doors no one else is allowed to see. But eventually, the cracks show. She released a short documentary a few weeks later, artsy, black and white, full of slow shots of her wandering empty theaters and staring wistfully at rain-speckled windows. She narrated it herself. Sometimes, her voice intoned, "The pressure to be perfect makes us make imperfect choices." It was vague. Purposefully abstract. But everyone knew what she was doing. The comments were brutal. James was never the pressure. He was the peace. You mean the choice to lie? The only perfect thing was your acting. Her follower count dropped. Slowly at first. Then in waves. Sponsors backed out of endorsements. One by one, projects that once clung to her name began to detach. But what really ended it, what truly snapped the last thread, was a single anonymous post. Someone compiled a year's worth of behind-the-scenes footage, photos, and audio clips of her and Ethan on set. The final audio was the nail in the coffin. Emily's voice, weary but unmistakably hers, "James would forgive me no matter what. That's what makes it easy." That line hit harder than any scandal. Because it wasn't evil. It wasn't monstrous. It was honest. Too honest. And it exposed what people feared most, that they had loved someone who took advantage of love. The empathy evaporated. The redemption arc collapsed. Even her longtime manager, Nathan, quietly stepped away from her team. And Ethan? Well, he wasn't done yet. He flipped. Started leaking her secrets, online texts, emails, half-written scripts, even videos of her crying backstage, muttering about how she was tired of pretending to love a man she pitied. She tried to shut it down legally, but the damage was done. Now it was her turn to bleed. And if far from the storm breathed freely for the first time in years. I stopped checking her profiles. I stopped asking Clara for updates. I started taking early roles again, indie films, mostly. Nothing grand. Nothing flashy. But honest work. Scripts that demanded vulnerability. Roles that required I excavate everything inside me. And it worked. I started getting noticed, not for my past, but for my craft. Slowly, my name returned to conversations that didn't involve scandal. One day, while sitting in a makeup trailer between takes, Clara handed me her phone. "She's asking to meet," she said, not even trying to disguise her disapproval. I glanced at the screen. It was Emily. No flowery introduction. Just a simple line, "If I tell the truth, will you stand beside me?" I stared at it for a long time, then handed the phone back. "You know the answer," I said. "And so does she." I didn't hate her. Not anymore. But I no longer owed her anything. She taught me that love can be conditional, can be theatrical, can even be strategic. But what I learned on my own, what London taught me, what silence taught me, was that love without self-respect is just captivity with a prettier name. And I was done being caged by her memory. That night, I deleted the last backup folder of our photos. No ceremony. No long stare. Just a right click and a quiet confirmation. Because healing, I've come to learn, isn't loud. It's not applause or recognition or public sympathy. It's the soft realization that you can finally live a day without them crossing your mind. And when that moment comes, you don't need to announce it. You just breathe. And walk forward. When a star falls in this industry, it rarely crashes, it disintegrates slowly, unraveling one endorsement at a time, one unfollow, one muted hashtag, until the silence becomes louder than the applause ever was, and that was exactly how Emily vanished from the spotlight she used to command like it was made for her veins, not just her face. The brands that had once competed to dress her now ghosted her emails. Her team downsized like rats leaving a burning ship, and even the PR firms that specialized in salvaging the irredeemable started passing on her name as if it were cursed, because there's only so much spin you can apply to betrayal when the receipts are clear, the fans are angry, and the love story you sold was built on a borrowed script. And meanwhile, I was being thanked by strangers, by ex-fans of hers, by peers I hadn't spoken to in years who wrote to say, "You handled it with class." Though no one ever saw the nights I lay awake wondering if Grace was just another name for cowardice, if silence meant healing, or if it simply meant I was still afraid to scream. But despite the questions, the offers started rolling in, first small roles, indie scripts with raw edges and complicated characters, directors who wanted emotion not spectacle, and something in me clicked when I stepped back onto those bare stages with peeling paint and folding chairs, because I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't memorizing lines to mask my own story, I was channeling it, sculpting it into something that lived and breathed and ached truthfully, and the audience could feel it, even in the small theaters where the applause echoed too loudly in half-empty rooms, even in student films shot on borrowed cameras. There was something there, something real, and people noticed. Suddenly casting agents were whispering my name with interest instead of pity, and when I was offered a role in a low-budget psychological drama, broken musician grieving the suicide of his younger brother, I took it without hesitation, because I knew how to break on camera now, I knew how to shatter without blinking, and that set lit something in motion. The film made a quiet ripple at festivals, word spread, and somehow, without me trying, without manipulation or marketing, I was back in the conversation, and for once, I felt like I belonged there, not because I was someone's lover, or someone's tragedy, but because I'd earned it frame by frame, performance by performance. And yet, just as I was rediscovering myself, the industry turned its cruel eye back on Emily again, because it always does. It circles back to the wounded like vultures, and the paparazzi who had once sold her as a goddess now devoured her every move for scraps of scandal, one day publishing a grainy photo of her alone at a cafe, face gaunt, eyes ringed with exhaustion, a headline that read, "America's Darling or Fallen Diva." And I couldn't help but feel the sting of it, not because I missed her but because I remembered what it felt like to be reduced to a single photo, a single frame that carried none of the context, none of the pain, just a narrative someone else controlled. And then Ethan, if you could believe it, to crawl back into relevance by opening a new account, posting blurry selfies and vague messages about healing and being misunderstood. But the public had made up its mind about him, and when his former classmates held a live stream to recount the physical and emotional abuse they'd endured, it was like watching a man drown in his own reflection. No one offered him a hand, no one gave him a life raft, not even Emily, who had gone so quiet her own fandom began turning on itself. CP fans fighting solo stands, old supporters blacking out their profile pictures, fan pages disbanding en masse while newer actresses seized the moment and inherited the spotlight like war prizes. And I should have felt vindicated, should have celebrated this twisted justice, but instead I just felt still, like I had finally reached the eye of a storm that had spun for too long. And one afternoon Clara sent me a clip from a talk show where two younger actors discussed my performance in that indie film. One of them said, "He acts like he's lived every emotion," and I smiled, not because of pride but because they were right. I had lived it, the betrayal, the shame, the quiet resilience that grows in empty rooms. And later that evening, as I walked home from rehearsal under a drizzle that smelled faintly of moss and metal, I realized I hadn't thought of Emily all day, not once, and that hit me harder than any memory of her ever did, because letting go isn't loud, it's not final, it's not theatrical, it's the slow withdrawal of emotional gravity, the moment you don't notice the silence she left behind because it's been replaced with your own music, your own voice, and that night, for the first time, I drafted a story of my own, not a character, not a role, just a man who survived being loved wrong and chose not to rot in the aftermath, and maybe one day I'll film it, or maybe I won't, maybe it's enough that I finally wrote it down at all, but as I hit save, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number, "Can we meet?" Just once. And I didn't open it, didn't answer it, didn't even let myself wonder if it was her, because some chapters deserve to be closed without punctuation, some people only return when they realize they can't rewrite the ending, and me. I was no longer interested in reruns, I was already casting for the next scene, and this time, I was the one writing the script. It was raining the night she showed up again, not the cinematic kind of rain that taps gently on windows and invites nostalgia, but the relentless, bone-soaking downpour that makes you wonder if the sky is trying to wash something away, and maybe it was, because when I opened the door to the small performance venue I'd just finished rehearsing in, there she was, standing across the street beneath a broken street lamp, drenched, hair clinging to her cheekbones, eyes hollow in a way I hadn't seen before, not even at her lowest, and for a moment just a breath I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't call out, just stared like she was a ghost haunting the version of me she couldn't reach anymore, and then she stepped forward, slow and steady, as if each footfall was a question she didn't want answered, and by the time she crossed the street, her voice cracked from the cold, from emotion, from everything unspoken between us. "James," she whispered, "I know I don't deserve your time," and I didn't deny it, didn't interrupt, just let her speak, because sometimes silence is the only way to hear the truth unfold, and she told me everything, not rehearsed, not pretty, her regrets, her fear of becoming irrelevant, how she clung to Ethan because she thought he represented the last piece of her childhood innocence, how she mistook control for comfort, how every lie was easier than facing the truth that I had become the person she couldn't manipulate, and when she said, "I ruined it all," I finally looked her in the eye and said gently but without softness, "No, you chose what mattered most to you, and it wasn't me," and she didn't cry, not at first, just closed her eyes like that hurt worse than anger, because what she wanted was forgiveness she hadn't earned, a second chance with someone who no longer lived in the house of longing she once occupied, and I told her that. I told her I had loved her fully, completely, even when she gave me only fragments, even when she rationed her affection. Like I was a secret too fragile for the world to touch, but I wasn't angry anymore, not because I forgot, but because I remembered everything too clearly to keep wanting it, and I thanked her not for the pain, but for teaching me where I ended and where she began, because now, I finally knew the difference between love and sacrifice, between loyalty and self-erasure, and she nodded through tears that came too late, not performative but real, raw, the kind that comes when you finally see what you've broken, and as the rain ran down her cheeks and into the collar of her coat, she asked, "Can we start again, as friends?" And I hesitated, not because I hated her, but because I knew that some people are better left behind the curtain of memory, so I told her the truth, maybe one day, when your name doesn't taste like the end of something, and that was the kindest closure I could offer, because I didn't want revenge, didn't want her to suffer, I just wanted to live unshadowed, and when she finally walked away into the mist, I let her go without looking back, then stepped into the theater again, the smell of sawdust and worn velvet wrapping around me like home, because the next scene in my life was already in motion, and for once, it didn't begin with her name, it began with mine, in bold, on a script I had written myself, a story about reclamation, about the quiet kind of strength that comes not from rising, but from refusing to stay small, and when the lights dimmed for our dress rehearsal that night, I walked onto that stage not as someone healing, not as someone recovering, but as someone who had finally arrived, alone, whole, and entirely unafraid of the silence.